Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is the Body Smart Podcast.
And today we are talking all things body image, the evolution of body image pressure for women, deep fakes, AI, social media,
Mental health.
all of the things, all of those elements that we have to contend with as women.
Yeah, and there's so much, and it's getting a lot more complicated, I would say, as well. Almost unmanageable in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people are a little bit at a loss in terms of like, how do you navigate this new social era?
Yeah, and the scary thing is it's affecting women younger and younger. So, I mean, I remember at secondary school, so like 11 plus, feeling that pressure, but not really before that. I was allowed to just be a little girl. Whereas there's a recent study that I found that nearly a third of children aged 5 to 6 in the US select an ideal body size that is smaller than their current perceived size.
Wow.
And by age 7, 1 in 4 has been on a diet.
Which is insane. I mean,
age 7.
We actually get a lot of DMs from really young girls, which obviously we can't give advice to, but we try to ask them to speak to the parents. But like it's heartbreaking to see like an 11-year-old DMing asking for help around their weight and body image. And obviously that's something that they're concerned about at that age, which it's like, for me, when I was like 11 years old, I was just kicking a ball around in the street and riding my bike.
I was still probably playing Barbies.
Yeah. So, you know, the fact that it's becoming that much of a thing so early on is it is really heartbreaking and gut-wrenching.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it is a very human thing because we are social beings and the need to fit in is like deep wired in our system, because that's essentially like as a group of pre-medieval, what's the word? Primeval
it's a way
people.
to survive,
Yeah, you had to fit in with the group. You had to not be the one that was excluded from the group. So not only like doing everything that everyone else is doing, but also coming across as one of the group, not the other, the weird, different person was really important.
Yeah.
So we are hardwired to do it. And also there is, that theory in psychology where you are the makeup of the 5 people closest to you. And whereas in the past, maybe that was your 5 11-year-old mates.
Yeah.
Actually now you've got social media and all these other influencers.
That makes up like considering like screen time, it's just going up and up and up. I think for maybe Sam can get some stats on this, but maybe it's like 7 to 9 hours is like the average teenager is spending on their phones. So it's like,
I mean, that's even adults as well.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a crazy amount of time to be spending on something that can that heavily like taps into like all the psychology of your brain in terms of like keeping you like addicted to it and keeping like your dopamine firing to like, so like you just keep swiping for more and more and more and more and more. But then also it's heavily influencing those kids and children more than parents are. You know what I mean? If you think about what typical nowadays is that it's not like one parent is working and one's maybe at home and that parent's maybe more the dominant parent raising the children. Most of the time nowadays, both parents are working and most of the time is being spent for the children at school and on social media. And if you actually look at maybe who is raising your kids now, it's possibly the state and social media versus the actual quality time that you have with your kids.
Well, yeah, so that's saying an average of 8 hours 39 for a teenager on a screen. That is genuinely more time that you're going to spend with your parent because you've got to sleep at some point. You've got to go to school at some point.
Of course.
And then the other 8 hours are on a screen. So it is quite scary. And actually you think maybe back in the day, there were influences like magazines and TV, but that was a very small proportion of your day and it wasn't constant.
And you also felt like if you went and sat in the living room with your kids and they were watching a TV show, you could hear and see what they're watching.
Yeah, and you could have a conversation about it and say like, oh, what did you think about that person's comments? Yeah,
versus like you wouldn't typically go on their social media feed and see what they're scrolling through because that feed is built for them.
Yeah.
And then also just like even if you went on their feed, you're not seeing the comments they're reading in that feed, the way people are perceived, the way people interact. And if it's for 7 to 9 hours a day, that is a stupid amount of influence that is happening.
The other thing that I think is really interesting, I saw an article about it and they put it really nicely that there has always been idolized women or idolized celebrities throughout time, whether that was even in like the Greek period, there was like an idealized form of a woman's body. But that used to be like a statue or a celebrity.
Yeah.
Whereas now there's all these different platforms for us to look at all these women, not just one thing, but also there's not a difference between a celebrity whose job it is to look good and everyone else.
Yeah.
So whereas the perception maybe used to be like, oh my God, she looks amazing, but your rational brain could say, well, yeah, because she doesn't do anything else. She's got a personal trainer, a private chef, like she doesn't have to sit in an office for 8 hours a day. Now you're comparing yourself to people who seem normal.
And like you, like
Yeah.
they could be the mum with 2 kids, but looks fantastic.
Right.
And a lot of people do show this highlight reel as well. And it's a way of like getting above you and like sort of the status game. Like, oh,
Yes.
look, I'm you, I'm your age, I've got 2 kids, I work full time, and look how great I look. And it's kind of like, how can you not have comparison? Like that's what you used to always say, like the worst thing that you could do is go to a school reunion, because, you know, you basically go back and meet all your peers 10, 20 years later, and nothing more could be a direct reflection of the decisions that you've made than spending time with the people you grew up with. So it's like straight away, if there's people who have been wildly successful and people who haven't, or people are rubbing it in your face, or whatever type of, you know, status, ego wagging game that becomes, you are instantly just in this comparison zone of like, well, they've done this and they've done that and I haven't done this and they've got this. And it could be, depends whatever you deem as success. If someone else has got it, you're going to compare yourself to them because you grew up with those people. But then social media is that on steroids, in the sense of you can go and find the people who look and sound and feel like you and have a similar life. And there can be value in that, in the sense of they might have other tips that can be really relatable to your circumstance. But I would unfortunately say that's probably like the minority of what's happening. It's more like a comparisonitis, if that's
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you bring up status, because for millennia, actually being a little bit heavier was a sign of status, because that meant you could probably afford to eat a bit more than the majority of people. Yeah. Most people were just struggling to get by, and to eat a bit more and be a bit chubby, for want of a better word, was a sign of status. Yeah. Whereas now in our culture, you know, you can get food 90, like whatever you want, all the time, 24/7. And actually it's a sign of status that you can afford to go to the gym, or you have the time to go to the gym. You're not working 2 jobs and trying to cook and trying to look after a house and trying to look after kids. You've got the status that you can buy healthy food. Yeah. So being thin, in inverted commas, how healthy looking is a status symbol. It is.
And yeah, I think we've even said this before, like it's also one of those things that you can't buy. So it has to be earned, you know, and that can be like the ultimate flex to an extent. Like you can't buy a fit. I mean, people will listen to this and go, well, you can get surgery, and you cannot give someone surgery to make them fit. You cannot give someone surgery to make them healthy. There's like things that people can do to change the aesthetics.
But there are like female body ideals that don't necessarily need to be fit. Like if you've got the curves in the right places and you wear the right clothes, you can get away with a lot.
But I mean, I think if you're going down that route of completely focusing like what you value on looks versus health, it's also a very short-lived path. You know what I mean? Like if you really pour into your looks for so long, like how like it doesn't, like it's gonna go over time, isn't it? Versus if you were to pour your attention into health, like you could still build an aesthetic body, or you know, like guys who are more muscular, or women, you can build a fit, healthy looking, strong body. It takes a little bit more work, but it also lasts as well. And when, you know, your looks do go over time, it is a part of aging.
No, your looks change.
Your looks change. That's a much better way of saying it. Yeah, they don't go. But yeah, I mean, you do see this. You know, there's like women. I mean, Liverpool's pretty bad for it, to be honest. But you do see women from I remember there was personal trainers in the gym I worked from getting Botox at 20.
Well, actually, the recommendation is the younger you start, the better.
To not get the creases in your skin.
Which is bonkers to me. But yeah, I mean, when you say about Liverpool's really bad for it, I was listening to a podcast episode of the El Sarah podcast the other day, and they had an esthetician. I don't know how you ever say that word. Okay. Yeah. But you know, someone who does like fillers and Botox. And she was saying there is actually a real culture, and it is like an echo chamber where there's this culture of looking a certain way because all your friends look like that, and then all the people that you follow on social media look like that. You want the next like extreme version of that look, and so it becomes like even more extreme, and the whole culture itself is like bigging itself up even further. And so like the size of fillers that people are asking for, and the levels of
Do you think you've seen this is just like history repeating itself? Because I feel like this was, if you go back 20, 30 years, it was like with fake boobs.
Oh yeah,
so
and then people went crazy
big, and now it's kind of like almost like retracted. And I've actually watched a lot of women actually start to get them taken out because they've started to get like bloodshot eyes, or the body started fighting back. That you've got, it's basically
a foreign body.
Yeah, you've got a foreign body inside you, and you've got plastic, or there's so that seems to be like what's happening with the lip fillers now. Seems to be, if you
it's
just
like what's more and more and more extreme.
Yeah, and you just keep seeing bigger and bigger and bigger lips. And
maybe it's because of that like social status thing. Well, you've got them like that, I'm going to go one next step.
Yeah, it must be, because I've obviously spoken to a lot of men, and it's not that I'm here to like judge anyone. Like, people can do whatever they want, and as long as it like genuinely makes them happy, I'm all for it. Like, you do you. But you do see some women take it to the absolute extreme, and when I speak to some other people, I'm like, is that, like, what do you think about that? Like, I'll ask their opinion, and it's just like, it looks crazy. Sometimes it looks like jokerish, clownish to an extent. Like, you've got these huge like stuck on lips, and it's like, wow, where's that coming from? You know what I mean?
And that's what's interesting, I think, about female body image pressure. Isn't always even about like being attractive to men. Like, a lot of it, I think, is into female status play and like showing up a certain way for that reason of wanting to fit in, not necessarily to be more attractive to men.
Yeah,
I think maybe in the past it was.
I think it's always been both. Yeah, even more so. I mean, like, if you look at, you know, the beauty industry is heavily focused at women, isn't it? Whether it comes to makeup and cosmetics and everything else that it goes with versus men. And I think it is because many men do chase the money status side of things versus like women do typically chase more of the looks status side of things. I think that's just a little bit hardwired into us, and then it's also how it's marketed to us from a very young age too. But yeah, it's 100% about, you know, trying to fit in, but I don't see it being a healthy thing or a good thing, and it's mainly because I'm yet to see somebody who's started getting Botox and then stopped, or started getting lip fillers and then stopped. So it's like, do you realize once you're doing something like that, like that's possibly an expense and something that's maybe detrimental to your health that you're starting to do now forever?
Well, what's interesting is actually one of the examples I was going to talk about later, Courtney Black. She used to have fillers and Botox and wear filters and makeup and everything. And she put out there about 3 years ago, she was like, okay, enough's enough. I'm going to stop this now. And made that like a decision that she was going to stop having the fillers. Now, conversation tangent that she did actually continue to use filters in some of her content, but yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for later on. Yeah. But so there are people out there who realize, do you know what, this isn't even me. I am going to stop.
Yeah, and you can understand why. Like I said, there's quite a lot of women who I've noticed who are like mid-40s, and they've started getting their breast implants taken out, just because they're noticing that like they don't feel good anymore, or they're starting to possibly even get an autoimmune condition because their body's like fighting back against this foreign substance in the body. The
other thing I think as well though is the idealized body changes. So when you got them 20 years ago, the idealized body looked like this, and then over time it shifts. So if we think about like back in the 20s, that flapper kind of stick up and down was super popular. Then you went into like the Marilyn Monroe era where it was all like voluptuous and curvy. Then you had like the twiggy 1960s, go back to stick thin.
Well, who was the photo that we posted on social media, and it was like the few from the noughties, and it was
Jessica Simpson?
No, I mean it was one of her, and there was another one.
Mariah Carey.
And they were like literally saying about like her legs were huge, and I was like, she looks tiny.
Yeah, and she's got really lean, muscular, great legs.
Yeah, like fantastic legs. And it's like back then they were saying like her legs are too big and too muscular. So it's always changing, and I think the difficulty is like having that North Star of like, it doesn't matter, you know, to an extent. Like in terms of like beauty standards, they're different all over the world. Like in a lot of Asian countries, people are very thin, and like, you know, you go into some shops around Asia or Japan, it's like it couldn't be more blatant that they're saying like you need to be skinny or you need to be small, and it changes from in different cultures as well. But it's also the comparison, the chasing, maybe something that's unrealistic, and then obviously filters and plastic surgery and cosmetics, and it kind of just all continually brings this.
Yeah, and this is what we wanted to get into today, because like actually there's one thing having this competition, if you want to call it that, with other women, but we've now got to a situation with AI and filters and Photoshop that you're not even comparing yourself to other women. You're comparing yourself to some idealized creation that the algorithm knows people find attractive.
Yeah.
How can you possibly compete with that?
You can't, and it's people are going to have to start to, you know, is it the Danae Mercer? You know, does a great job of calling some of this stuff out. I think there's another lady called Saggy Sarah.
Oh yeah, she's good. Yeah,
and she just put one up the other day, and she literally had like edited the waist in and this, and then just like changed it to how she actually looked, and just tries to show the comparisons. But you know, these editing apps can be used in, you know, and can change the way you look in seconds. And then on top of that, you've got the AI coming about, and then deep fakes, and it's all stuff that's on the horizon.
Yeah, and I think we should probably talk about that, just to give a bit more context to the audience, because if you haven't been exposed to it, you might be wondering what you're on about with the AI.
Yeah, so AI is artificial intelligence, and now you're able to make videos and photos look extremely realistic or completely real in a matter of just like typing in what you want. So
and they're not even based on anything real; they're completely made up.
Yeah, but you could say, I want to, you know, make a picture of a woman who's at a waterfall that looks like, I don't know, give me a random woman's name.
Kim Kardashian.
Okay, yeah, Kim Kardashian. But then you could be like, but also has a blend of this and this and this, and it will just generate that image.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be like, make the hips smaller, make the legs bigger, make the breasts bigger, and you could just create this artificial image of that person. And then but it's not a person, it's an artificial image that's being generated in seconds.
And what's bonkers now is there's whole Instagram profiles of non-people, of fake creations, but they're, unless you go into their bio and like look at it, you wouldn't know that. You just see a picture that comes up of this like immaculately presented, beautiful woman, and in your feed, that's just, oh my gosh, she looks amazing. She's not even a real thing.
Yeah.
It's bonkers.
Yeah, so you're gonna get that, and then you're gonna get AI voices that can sound however you want them to, or could just give a voice to that AI image. And then deepfakes is being able to basically be able to fake a video. So someone could make a video of me and you at this podcast table right now and have us saying some wild shit that isn't us, and it sounds like us, it looks like us, it moves like us, and right now it's okay, but this is the worst it will ever be.
As in, you could probably tell it was fake.
Yeah, so like, you know, if you think about like big podcasters like Joe Rogan or Chris Williamson and Andrew Huberman, those guys, and now because they can basically 100% get their voice pretty perfect.
Because there's enough data points to pick
Yeah, because they've got enough audio of them. They can pretty much make ads, and people are making ads and selling like bogus supplements and crap supplements using their voices and using, you know, clips of them. And it's I can tell, you know what I mean? But like it'll soon get to the point where I can't tell. And that is round the corner.
And that's where, you know, Sam, one of our editors, Sam and I were doing some research into these AI profiles yesterday. And he was sending me a couple that he was aware of. And there was one he sent me, Lil Michaela, she's called.
Lil Michaela.
Yeah, she her bio says 19-year-old robot living in LA. So at least she's kind of admitting that she's not a real thing. She has 2.7 million
it's wild.
followers. But like, she kind of still looks a bit ethereal and fake.
Right.
But then there's this other one that I found called Fit Aitana. Can't remember. I don't know how you say that. She just looks like a real woman. Right. She just 100% looks like a real woman.
Yeah.
And then that one has got basically like an OnlyFans.
Oh yeah, I've seen lots of that where they're basically using AI images to run OnlyFans pages, and some of these pages are making 10, 20, 30K a month, which is wild, but it just shows you.
But what's really interesting is there's two sides to this, because I feel like it means, real women don't have to subject themselves to that, so maybe it's empowering for women. But then on the other side, you're like, but then all these men think that that's a real woman and that's what they should expect in real life.
Yeah, I mean, that's the half the issues with porn to an extent, is like porn has just made the unrealistic beauty standards, again, just on steroids times 1,000, because if men are watching that on a regular basis, which a lot of guys are, then, you know, when you see a woman who's got stretch marks, or a woman who's had 4 kids and breastfed, and, you know, and your body starts to change, and that's normal, but you basically constantly are seeing picture perfect women. The comparison is there, you know what I mean? And that's bad for both. That's bad for men, and that's also bad for women. And then, yeah, you know, the AI images, again, are just, I've said it loads on this podcast, and I just think it's always so true, because it's one of those great songs. It's called You Should Always Wear Sunscreen. And there's just a line in that just sticks with me, because it obviously didn't predict social media coming the way it has, but it says, don't read beauty magazines. They will only make you feel ugly. You know, the message behind that is that if you are constantly comparing yourself to beautiful people, you will feel bad about yourself, because it's, and if you look at what social media is nowadays, it's just that it's that for 7 to 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
So how can you just look at picture perfect people all the time, and then go and look at yourself in the mirror and not be like, why don't I look like that? And then, yeah, you know, is that driving people's eating decisions, training decisions? Like, I feel like I can almost tell sometimes when I see some people in the gym, whether they're like, they're there and they're training. They could be lifting weights and doing all good things, but I can have a singular conversation with them and can almost tell, like, oh,
what's their motivation?
Your motivation to be here is not the healthiest at all. And hopefully, you know, I don't think mine was, to be honest, in the beginning, but it did change. But yeah, you can see that, and it's like, right, is a lot of behaviors from people now around food, around fitness, around how they're living their lives, being driven to try and even keep up with these unrealistic standards.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle, because there is a bigger emphasis for, like, I don't even know what the generation's called for, like, 20-somethings.
Gen Z. Millennials, and then Gen Z, and then side, you know what's even before that?
Gen X.
Yeah. Gen X.
Or Gen Y.
Gen Alpha. I can't keep up. It's flipping crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, we're millennials. We know that much. So yeah, anyway, they are really much more into fitness. Like, they'll go to the gym as like something that is a normal thing to do, even through their teens. But you're right. I wonder how much of that is driven through what we would want people to be the motivation versus, okay, I need a bigger bum, or I need to have a flat stomach, or I need to be seen to be going to the gym.
Yeah.
Rather than I want to be healthy.
So when I first started going to the gym, like, properly, was about 14, 15, and then I took some time off when I was about 16, and then started again 17, and I really took it seriously, like 18 to 19, like, just like full commitment for a year, and seeing like crazy changes. But even back then, so what, I'm going back 13 years, so 2010, no one went to the gym. No one my age went to the gym as a 18, 19-year-old.
Let alone women.
Yeah. So
like as in like a 20-year-old woman.
No, like no one went. Like, all the lads that I knew, all the guys that I knew, played football, went to the pub, played pool, like, just done like more sporting events and like hung out. No one went to the gym, versus even a lot of lads now my age go to the gym. And like, yeah, like, I think some of it is from a health side of things, but I also think like men have wildly become more conscious around how they look and how they're perceived, especially through the influence that they're getting through social media.
Yeah. And there was one study I found actually around like exposure to thinness promoting, this study called it thinness promoting media. And it did predict like disordered eating and comparison with others and body dissatisfaction. And it was mainly focused on thinness promoting media for women, as in like the women that it promoted were thin, and put that on a pedestal. And so it had that effect on the women, but equally it had an effect of men's decisions for their own bodies as well. So it did predict the more that a man saw this type of thin ideal woman, in inverted commas, the more likely they were to be dissatisfied with their bodies and to be on a diet, and that they expected women to look like the pictures and be on a diet. So it is really toxic. It's not just affecting women, it's affecting everyone.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, just a quick ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, we do ask if you would go and hit that subscribe button, because our goal is to be able to help all of you guys become body smart. And the way we can do that is by getting better guests on, more experts. And the bigger this podcast gets, the more guests we can get on here. And that is causing just like almost like a deficit in a relationship to an extent, and then obviously increased exposure. I mean, and I think like I've met like so many people who have got like hundreds of thousands of followers or millions of followers, and it's such a highlight reel. Every time I meet one of these people and I've like followed them for a while, I'm like, what they show versus what you see with spending like half a day with them or even a couple of hours, I'm like, oh wow, you're so different than what I perceived. And I know a lot of people do come across like really authentic and genuine, and you know, for some of those people that is the case, but people are showing you what they choose to show you, and that's it at the end of the day. And some people will show you like the bad times as well as the good, but most people are just showing you the good times.
Yeah.
And I think that causes those deficits, saying like, oh, my relationship should be like theirs. Look how happy they are all the time. Look how perfect their house is. Look how perfect their family is. Look how, you know, it's just like, and it's like this constant, like everyone just is on social media for all this time, looking at all these other people living their best lives. And it's like, why isn't my life like that? And it's just like, you can understand why that's going to make you feel a bit depressed and like unsatisfied with your current life.
One thing that I find really powerful, and I always say when we talk about this, is you can actually select what you see though. So the algorithm does react to what you like and interact with. Actually, if you could, you're really good at this. If you could explain what the algorithm is and how it works, that'd be great.
It's the algorithm nowadays. There's on Instagram, there's actually 3 types of feeds. So on your stories, it's called a social-based feed. You'll only see people on stories who you follow, unless it's an ad. So that's a social-based feed. That's only people you follow. Then in your actual feed, you'll get a mixture of social and interest. So social is people you follow who have posted, and then interest-based is what they predict you'll be interested in. And then if you go into like the Reels feed, that is just an interest-based feed, which just showing you stuff it believes you will be interested in and will watch. Now TikTok is all interest-based, so you'll typically not really see people that you follow. And YouTube is a mixture of the two. People you've subscribed to, and then people it believes you'll be interested in. And that's what you see when you get to like the end of a video on YouTube, and it gives you recommendations. That's what it believes from knowing your digital profile you will watch. But you can hack this to a degree. So you can one, unfollow lots of people or mute lots of people that you don't want to see more of their content or you feel it is not making you feel great. And then, like, if you were to just go on and go on your search feed and just type in, like, puppies, and then just watched, like, 20 puppy videos, 30 puppy videos, you will start getting suggested puppy videos as a part of your feed. And, again, like, I've used puppies as an example there, but you can do this with anything. Like, a lot of my feed is created around personal development, business, developing new skills, and humor. Because, like, for me, when I go there on social media, I'm like, oh, I can learn something new. I can get different insights and perspectives from people who are, you know, really successful. I kind of see it as like a cheat code. Like 30 years ago, I couldn't get access to billionaires or multimillionaires or people who are really successful in certain fields. I can be like, oh, and they share like a bit of insight of what works. I'm like, that's smart. Or I can be like, I don't agree with all what you've just said there, but I agree with that. And then you can just take all these little snippets and apply it to your life. And you know, you can acquire all these new skills and hacks, which I think is fantastic that you've got access to a wealth of people. And then the other side for me is like humor. Like, it's always good to have a good laugh. You know what I mean? It always changes your state in a really positive way. However, previously I used to be well too obsessed with just like changing my body, being more ripped, being lean, being bigger, and my feed was just constantly filled with ripped men, shredded guys, big jack guys who are lifting big weights, competing on stage, posting photos of them when they compete, which they don't look like, you know, the other 364 days of a year. And like, that was my comparison. And it wasn't, I had become aware of it and was like, this needs to change. I made a point of unfollowing all those people and then, you know, kind of going down the road I've just spoken about.
Yeah, and just by unfollowing, you're telling the algorithm, actually, this kind of thing doesn't interest me as much anymore. And so your interest feed even changes. It's not just the people you follow you've changed. You've managed to give it a bit of a heads up, like stop showing me stuff like this. So I think that's a very useful thing that someone can go and do. And also on the other flip side, there are people like we've mentioned already, like Danae Mercer and Brie Linehan and Sagi Sarah, who intentionally go the other way to highlight all the bullshit. So if you've still got, you know what, I do really like following that person because they give me lots of insight, but they do make me feel a bit less worthy. Like maybe just balance that out by having some other people that you follow that remind you, don't forget it might be a filter. Don't forget it might just be the right angle and some lighting that makes someone look good. And I think if you've got the balance.
Yeah, or don't forget, like, some people just have great fucking genetics, and it's like, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, I've been in that place before where I've literally looked at other people and been like, it's not fair that they have this. And it's like, as soon as you get into that like point, it just doesn't serve you at all. Like, I could say it about, you know, and we always look at the things that we don't have and say like, oh, I wish I had that of that person or this of that person. It's just like, it's just such a, you're just not empowering yourself in any way. And, you know, for me, like, I'm dyslexic and I've struggled to spell pretty much my whole life. And for the last 5 years, I've used Grammarly, and I have to proofread everything.
Which is like a
3
plugin.
times. Best thing I've ever used, by the way, anyone who struggles with spelling. Like, learned more using that over the past 5 years than ever did in school. And Simon over here has been our my spell check, I should have said, for the past years prior to that. But like, I could just look at that and take that sort of victim mentality of like, oh, it's not fair that I'm dyslexic and this is so much harder for me and people can do this so much faster. And it's just like, how does that serve me? Instead of being like, right, this just is what it is. I'm going to kind of just have to accept that and look at developing other skills to work around it. Because otherwise you do just get into that pointing the finger and going, well, they're so much more privileged than me and they have this and they have that. And it's just like, I just think once you get into that mindset, you're becoming a victim. And sometimes it's a victim of circumstance, and sometimes you just, you know, like, some people do just like, some people just win the genetic lottery, but then it's just like, do they? Like, you just don't know what's going on behind closed doors.
Well, this is the other thing. Like, you can look at someone and be envious of the one angle of their life that you see. It doesn't necessarily mean you'd want to swap places with their whole life.
No, not at all. And even if you look at like what we revere as like success in society, like there couldn't be more clear to me now, as I've just like studied business and people who are really successful for a long period of time. Near enough all, if not all, people who are hyper successful have been driven there by very, very, very dark demons. And that is being the fuel to the fire to allow them to get to those places. So some people are like, oh, I really wish I could be Tiger Woods. And it's like, if you go and look at like what Tiger Woods' childhood was like and what he went through, would you have swapped shoes? Like, really? Probably not. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think you can see this in lots of things, you know what I mean, where people look at someone and put them on a pedestal, but like, you don't see sometimes the darkness that's taking them there for that to happen. And again, there couldn't be more of a perfect analogy for social media. You're seeing the smallest snippet of what you perceive as success, and not all the bullshit behind that. Or even just like, not even all the bullshit. Like, well, I guess it is, because it's just not real. Like, if it's a filter, or if it's this, or if it's AI.
But not even it has to be that traumatic, or it has to all be bullshit. But like, if you look at somebody on Instagram and you think, oh my God, they've got an amazing physique, I would love to look like that. Would you like to eat like them? 365. Would you like to go to the gym as much as they do? Would you like to not have any children? Like, you can't compare their life without looking at it as a whole. Like, you have to think, do I want to do all of the inputs to get that output, rather than just looking at the output? And I think that's the danger with social media. There are accounts that are not like that. There are people who are a lot more honest about the effort that it takes to look good, or they're more honest about like, hey, I'm not perfect. Like, this is what happens when I don't feel like blah, blah, blah. But it is very easy to just look at the very nice pictures and go, God, that would be lovely.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? And it's not reality. And over time, if that's what you feed in your mind, it's going to become a slow drip for you to poison. And you have to take the initiative and the awareness of that. Because those social media platforms are not going to unfollow those people for you. They're literally just going to keep feeding whatever they can to you to keep you on the platform for as long as possible, because then they can run more adverts and make more money. And that's pretty much how they run, and they're going to continue to keep doing that. Well,
this is the thing. What is next? Because Instagram's only been around 13 years, and like, the impact it has now is huge. The influence it has, and even just like we've talked about today, the AI, the fake profiles. in 13 years, that's a huge change in our social behavior. What's the next 13 years got in store?
I mean, I can't predict the future. If I were to say what's coming in the future, it's probably, I actually don't know if it could be the end of creators as a whole, as in like your social media feed will become completely artificially generated through artificial voices and feed you the exact feed with the exact sounds, noises, pitches, and movements that you enjoy watching the most at that time in your life. And it will probably be succinct to your heart rate and your heart rate variability and your menstrual cycle. And it will know that, hey, on day 21 of your cycle, you feel exactly like this and you typically act in this way. So we're going to feed you content that keeps you on the platform for this much longer. And it will all be computer generated.
Which basically just makes me want to delete all of the apps.
Yeah, it's I guess, you know, as much as like we could, this is quite negative, to be honest, and it's all a bit like dark and scary and we don't know what's going to happen, but we always navigate our way through it. And I think there's, you know, for me, you know, social media has been just a wealth of information, and I've been able a wealth of knowledge, should I say. I've been able to learn so much, apply so much, and been able to meet some fantastic people. And I think we just have to look at it like a tool, just like we've had tools throughout the whole of human history. This is a tool, and it's a very, very powerful one. So you have to be careful with how you kind of wield it. But if you do use it to your advantage, it can be one of the greatest tools that you possess. But you do, you know, it's that.
I guess it's that
Spider-Man quote, is it?
Oh, I don't know it.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Is that a Spider-Man quote?
Is it a Spider-Man quote?
Yeah, it's Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben and Spider-Man. It probably comes from someone else, but he basically says, with great power comes great responsibility. And there is a lot of power in the phone. It's not a phone, it's like a supercomputer nowadays.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can really wield that to your advantage if you've got the right steps in place.
Yeah, and I think always having that in the back of your mind to have a critical eye whenever you see anything, because we were all brought up to like not believe everything you read in the papers, or you know, understand that there's maybe some kind of angle that they're trying to get across, and that is now being taught to kids. But if you missed that part because you were already a grown-up, you actually have to remind yourself every now and then, like, okay, maybe this isn't 100% real. Maybe there are filters. Maybe there are people who are trying to just show the best parts of their lives, and I need to just remind myself.
Yeah. And I don't think that's going to change either. So it is just a case of being aware of it. But yeah, just, you know, if there's somebody that you regularly see on your feed, you've just got to kind of start to ask yourself a question like, is this serving me? Is this making me happy? Am I not feeling great about it? Am I comparing myself to her or him? And if over time you've seen that a couple of times and you've asked yourself that question, just unfollow, you know, or unmute if you don't feel like you can unfollow because it's a friend or family or someone else. And it does, you can start to really curate your feed in a way that's positive, like a lot more positive. And if, you know, coming back to what you said a little bit earlier, you know, you are the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Social media is probably 1, 2, and 3 of that 5 nowadays. So making sure that is having an influence on you, which is in a really positive way, is super important. I just had a business event last week, and last time I went to one, I met this guy there called Tim, and he's 21, and he's got like a couple of £1 million, you know, sort of business, and I'm like, I thought I was young when I started business at like 24. This guy's like 21 and started when he was 15, and I was like, how? And he was like, started following Gary Vee at 15, started learning about business, done Ty Lopez's course. And I was like, wow. I was just like a little bit in awe, you know what I mean? He started, I was like at 15, I was like, I didn't even know. I was Xbox and riding my bike, you know what I mean? But I was like, fair play, you know what I mean? It's like he, in a sense, has been able to use a lot of that wealth of information and apply it and build a business, and is doing some great things. And that's amazing to watch. But, you know, like, I guess that's like on the other side of it. If you do grab the bull by the horns and you do, and you are conscious and mindful of this, and like, obviously if anyone's listening, they can do it for themselves, but equally, like, can you help do that with your kids? You know, what a great exercise to do where you sit down with your kids and you maybe you can't have that 7 to 9 hours with them a day, but can you be mindful of who they're following and what they're seeing and what they're watching,
and get them asking questions?
Yeah. And, you know, like, and kind of like, hey, like, you're not going to get the phones off them. You're not going to get them off social media, not if they're like in the teens. It's like, hey, like, what did you watch today? What did you learn? You know, what did you consume? What do you find funny? Like, ask them some questions to the point where like you're being like, okay, this thing is playing a huge impact on my child's life. Like, I'm not going to be able to fully control it, but maybe I can have a really positive influence. Maybe I can ask some questions and come at it with a different sort of approach instead of like, why are you doing that? Or why you have to kind of look at it a little bit like.
You have to embrace it in order to be able to get on side with it, hey?
Yeah, because if you just attack your kids and say you shouldn't be doing that shit, like it's just never going to work, is it? It's like, I just look at a lot of stuff like that, like sales. You know what I mean? Sales is just trying to get someone to do what you want them to do, and like if you're going to be the wiser old parent in that sense, which you basically are, you want the best for your kids. So, learning how to communicate them in an effective way to get the outcome that you believe is best. There's so many things that I done when I was a kid and I hated at the time. And then as I've got older, I've gone, thanks for making me do that. You know what I mean? Like, with my parents, like I had like a paper round. I had 2 paper rounds when I was 13. I hated it.
Did you?
Oh yeah. Who wants to get up at 5:30 in the morning when you're that age?
Fair.
Yeah, and like no one else in school is doing it. Why am I? And it's like, but it's like it taught me the value of money and at a very early age, and taught me like getting a routine and being disciplined, and it just when I was going out and spending money, I was like, oh, I've earned this, and I seen a different value of money than some of the other kids I was spending time with did. And at the time, I hated that as well. But then you can kind of see why they done that from a younger age, and the importance of it. So and just like I said, just with this, 7 to 9 hours a day is just an insane amount of time.
It is, and I know you said, well, social media is probably going to be 1, 2, and 3. Like, we're not going to get rid of it. The genie's out the bottle, but you can also maybe limit your time on it. And I know there's a tendency to just, I've got a spare 10 minutes, I'll just pick up my phone and scroll.
Yeah.
Like, maybe pick up an audiobook or a podcast or play a brain training game or like do something else. I'm not saying that you should never go on Instagram, but if you realize actually it is taking over more of my time than I would really choose if I was conscious about this, do something else. It's hard. I've had really to try very hard not to be that person that the minute I'm in a queue or the minute I'm just sat on a train, I just get my phone out. Yeah. I've had to think about like, make sure I take a book with me or make sure I've got some work to do. Or I can't just sit there, which is like next step. Yeah, like that's the next step for me. But if you do practice, it is something that's possible. And then you start to reduce the influence that has because it's not such a constant. It's not so much of your time. Yeah, the phone is just the adult dummy or the adult pacifier. You know what I mean? It's the second on board. It's just like, whoop. And it does, it's definitely something to be mindful of. I actually have 2 alerts that you can set in settings on Instagram. So I have one that is a 10-minute alert. Ooh. And it basically just comes up and it brings up like a time wheel. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, so I'll try and find it in the settings. But yeah, it comes up at 10 minutes. So if I've been on it for 10 minutes, it's kind of just like a cue. That's really good. And sometimes if I'm deep into a hole, I'm just like, okay, I'm just keep going. But most of the times I'm like, that's enough. Because 10 minutes is quite a long time, really, in terms of your busy life. Oh yeah, it is. You know what I mean? But it's crazy how quick that can go. And it's also, if you just look at like how dopamine works, that first 10 minutes is probably the most entertaining, satisfying, enjoyable for you. Once you go into like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, like that's when it just becomes more numbing and numbing and numbing. And you almost have that addictive behavior that this isn't good for me anymore, but you just keep doing it. Mm-hmm. And then the other one that I've got on, which I'm proud to say I haven't had that come up in a while, is I have a 2-hour one. So wow, that is long. Yeah, but that's like throughout a whole day. Okay. Oh, a cumulative one. Yeah, like a cumulative one. Oh, that's really good. So this is within Instagram. It's not a separate app. This is within Instagram, yeah. Well, they don't promote this, do they? I've had the guy who's what's the Instagram's head guy, Moseri. Yeah, like I follow him and he brought this up and showed it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I went into the settings and put that up. And sometimes, I might be on there and spend an hour doing Ask Me a Question. So that can rack up a time. But I actually used to find the time I would spend the most time on my phone would be when I was hungover. And then I would equally feel the worst because I've spent like 2 hours. Like the second that ever goes off, I'm instantly like, put my phone under a pillow. I'm like, that is enough, especially with how much I value my time. But yeah, there are like little things that you can do like that. It's like it's a cue to get you to I think that's an ultimate life hack. I can't believe I didn't know it existed.
We'll have to find it. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll share it in the podcast notes or something. You know,
Yeah.
like how to add these settings on, because it makes a really big difference.
Yeah, because sometimes, well, not sometimes, most of the time, you completely lose track. You go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah,
And then before you know it, all this stuff that we've been talking about, it isn't conscious that you're thinking, oh my God, I want to be like her. Oh my God, I want to be like her.
Yeah.
It's all subconscious.
it is.
And the more you expose yourself, the more you're creating that, like, this is normal. I should be like this. This is normal.
Yeah, yeah. I've also got as well. I'll show you this. I've got this 3 taps on my power button, and it makes it go into called Grayscale. So if you look at my phone now, it's
So
just
it looks a
black
bit
and
more
white.
boring.
Yeah. So if you were to go on like Instagram now, it's no way near as entertaining because
It's all in black and white.
it's all in black and white. So that's a way, like, I try to leave that on throughout the day because, and I have my phone on like do not disturb permanently, but it's like if I pick it up, I just try to leave that on. It's like nothing is as stimulating because you're losing the colors. And
Yeah.
Again, they're just, it is so difficult because everything from like the food that we're getting nowadays, highly palatable, made by design, the way food's served up to us, you know, everything's making us move less. Then you've got all this social media hacking. Like, we are fighting against our physiology and psychology so much nowadays just to feel good,
be normal.
just to be normal.
Yeah.
But you know, you do have to just start to raise that awareness about it. Otherwise, you will just fall into the pit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will make sure those tips and settings go in the notes. So
Yeah.
if you're listening now, go to the description of the episode and you'll be able to see how to do that.
Definitely.
Amazing. Well, hopefully that's made you critically think a little bit about what you're consuming and made you feel a bit better, hopefully, that you're not alone if you've been comparing yourself and feeling a bit less than. Got
Definitely.
a few tips on how to change that up. So thanks for being here, as always.
Hey everyone, if you've been listening to the podcast and enjoying the episodes, we'd love it if you could go and give us a quick review so we can keep cutting the BS and getting better and better.